Hello, my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel, Springboard Thought. Today I'm doing the Discworld Tag created by Katja, who is also hosting the Discworld read-along right now for Going Postal, co-hosted by Sina, Rosie Cockshutt, Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and Sita at Beating Around the Books. And I'll have the links below for that. If you'd like to participate, we still have till the end of the week, I believe, to complete the book. I'm 33% done with it, reading on my Kindle. Even though I hate humor, I'm enjoying it quite a bit, more than I thought I would, so I'm glad that I am participating. You can hop on the Discord and chat with people about what's going on. For instance, is Stanley raised by peas or not? You can weigh in on this heavy discourse. Okay, so there's a few prompts for this. I've got them written down on my phone, so if you see me looking down, that's why. First prompt is The Witches. What is your favorite story where the so-called odd folk are far kinder than normal folk? The first one that I could think of for this was one of the only Neil Gaiman books that I really, really love, which is Neverwhere. And that is about a man who is negotiating society normally, fitting in roughly capitalism. And when things start going wrong for him and he enters the underworld, the Neverwhere, which is essentially everyone who is dispossessed or homeless or whatever sort of analogy you want to draw for people who are slipped between the cracks of society. There's a entire sort of universe under London that he has to negotiate, and he finds that for the most part people are far more empathetic, far more humane, and it is a really strong and interesting conceptual idea that I think Gaiman executes very well. The City Watch. Your favorite police procedural or sleuthing story where the heroes create nearly as much drama as the villains. For this I chose Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. This is a really interesting story that I actually like a lot more the more distance that I had from it, and it's probably just because the marketing material didn't set it up very well at all. Essentially, this is about a private detective person who's called to a magic school. Like, mysterious death happens. She needs to go in and investigate, and she is called because she's sort of like aware of the wizarding world as it is, but not a part of it. So she's sort of like impartial. She should be able to follow the clues, and I guess the idea is that most sort of wizards and magicians and things, they don't know how to investigate it properly and or are all suspects anyway because they were at the school when it happened. The death is rather suspicious, I think. They're wandering in the stacks of the restricted section of the library, and I can't remember how they died, but it's pretty terrible from what I remember. Like, terrible in the sense of what happened to them is terrible, not it was written terribly. And the PI is like maladjusted, a person that didn't get into like Hogwarts type deal, but is like negotiating their path as a like middle child or whatever that didn't sort of meet the expectations of the parents, and sort of trying to make up for it, but then re-bridging this gap with their family members and entering this world that they never thought that they would get into. And so I actually quite liked it. I gave it 4 stars, and I'd like to reread it as well. It was sort of, it's billed as something a lot more magical than what it actually is. Like, it plays out more like a normal detective type situation, more than it hinges on like cool magical stuff happening. What is your favorite story that moves away from painting death as life's ultimate villain? This is quite the prompt 3 for death. I have to say Dead Like Me. This was a fantastic show that I think ran only 2 seasons. It's about a young woman who drops out of college, Georgia, or George, doesn't really have her life figured out, has a very tumultuous relationship with her mother who hates the word moist. Mandy Patinkin is in this, and he is phenomenal as usual. And it is about her suddenly coming to an untimely demise, and death allows her to become a reaper instead of dying. And when she does this, she looks completely different to everybody else, and she's simultaneously grieving, you know, her own death, the loss of her family, and trying to negotiate a new purpose in life, as well as the meaning of death, the meaning of life. It's dark comedy. It's really great. If you can get your hands on it, I think it's pretty hard to find these days. Luckily, when it was popular here, I grabbed it on DVD. Number 4, Mois von Lipwig. What is your favorite story featuring the ultimate anti-hero? So for this, I'm going to choose another TV show, which is Hannibal, which I think far exceeds the books and the movies. It is so deliciously wonderful, that show. And I really like the interplay between Will Graham, the person who is hunting a serial killer, who the audience knows is Hannibal. There's lots of queer undertones. There's lots of different explorations happening. It's very dark. I'm not sure how well it holds up for depicting neurodiverse people. That's something, a little bit of a pitfall that series always falls into, which is kind of like a fetishization of neurodivergent people, and also like kind of concocting the ultimate neurodivergent person, and there's pros and weaknesses to his condition, but obviously it is conducive to him solving crimes with an empathy disorder. I can't say that I could speak intelligently about whether the show holds up on that respect, but in every other way, it is absolutely one of my favorite shows, absolutely one of the best portrayals of like a villain. The cinematography, the acting, the script, everything about that show was near perfect. Number 5, RINCEWIND, The Wizards. What is your favorite story featuring eccentric academics or academic institutions? This will definitely be Vita Nostra behind me. I have a video all about this with an explanation at the end of it, because it is so intricate and dense and complex. I think it's wonderfully well written. It's about a young woman who is living, I believe, in Moscow at the time, and she goes on vacation with her mother, and she meets an old man, or like a pervert, you know, type deal, stalking her. But instead it ends up being even stranger. This man holds her in a dream loop. Her day keeps repeating unless she does the task that he assigns her, and it's all very like esoteric and very strange tasks. For instance, she has to wake up at dawn, I think, and swim to a buoy out in a river before anybody wakes up, and then come back. And when she's done, she throws up gold coins. When she has completed this enough times, the days start proceeding, and the man disappears. But later on, he essentially orchestrates it so that she gets into a magic school, and on pain of essentially hurting her family, coerces her into going to the school, for which the currency is the gold coins that she has thrown up. All of this is on the back jacket, by the way. It's just the setup. And when she gets there, she finds a very like Kafka-esque type institution. It's inscrutable. The work that she is doing is inscrutable. They're not taking a particular subject. They all take specific curriculum together, and then there is a mystery subject in which they have the institution has printed its own book for this mystery course, and it's completely opaque to every student. When they try to read it, their brain hurts. Sometimes other weird things start happening. They start having weird dreams. They start behaving differently. And essentially, the book is a vehicle in which the reader goes on the same sort of ride as the protagonist in this case, where you're trying to figure out what she is learning as well. And the mystery of the book parallels exactly what is she trying to figure out in it. And so it's just very entertaining, and there's so much payoff when you figure everything out and everything clicks into place. It also has like the best magic system that I could ever think of, basically. It's genius, elegant. It has a lot to say about the themes, about academia, about society in general, about Kafkaesque type institutions, about coming of age. It's absolutely like a modern masterpiece in my opinion. Prompt 6 is Tiffany aching and the Knack Mac FEEGLES, which I have no idea what that means. What is your favorite coming of age story? In this, I'm going to go with another magic school type thing. I'm going with Lev Grossman's The Magician's Trilogy, the actual books. In the first book, Quentin, the protagonist, is a bit of a douche. He's self-centered, nerdy, self-deprecating, sort of constantly in a malaise, wants to sleep with his best friend who doesn't want to sleep with him, so he feels resentment towards her, who's on the career track of like Ivy League, but then he gets called to a magician school, his life changes, and in the process he's quite selfish and he's not a very good person. And all three of those books is a wonderful trajectory for his character arc. There's a mini sort of character arc in each book, but throughout the entirety of all of them, his character work is just fantastic. You go from like understanding him and sort of empathizing him if you're that age and a young white male, probably. I know some people just couldn't handle it and noped out of the book, and I can completely understand why they would do that. But for me, Quentin was kind of like a reflection and something that I could easily understand why he was the way he was and how he functions, especially as sort of like a nerdy, intelligent, non-sociable, introvert person who inadvertently is an asshole a lot of the time, which is early 20s for me, pretty much. The first book is a little strange in that the first half is like a coming of age story and the second half is a complete inversion of typical fantasy tropes and trajectory. So it's hard to sort of get your mind around it sometimes, and it doesn't always handle women as characters very well, for sure. I think that's like the number one critique that people have for that book. I do think it gets better as it goes, and if you find something that you like, there's a lot of payoff in the character of Quentin throughout it. And then Discworld. What story has some of the best world building elements you can think of? The first thing I can think of is Sandman, because it has some like very organic world building in which you presuppose that this world is exactly like ours. There's some, it opens with like satanic ritual to call some kind of demon, and then it ends up being, you know, an incarnation of Dream, the main character of the book. But then as it branches out and continues, it ends up being about so many other things than just our dreams. Ends up being about corruption, about wealth, about power dynamics, about what constitutes power away from a sort of Western Eurocentric idea, in the sense when he goes to hell and says, "I am hope." That's an iconic line that I think is just like burned into my brain forever. And there's just a lot of surprising things, like Delirium saying really profound things like losing time, and it's always in the last place that you look for it. It's always just like a little bit surrealistic, but still sort of orbits our own lives and has a lot to say and communicate about our own world and our relationship to it. And so I think it's just something that immediately readers grasp onto and identify with, and the world building just sort of like springs up from the ground around that. And then the last one is, fun fact before the final bit, Going Postal doesn't have a chapter 8 and instead has a chapter 7A between chapters 7 and 9. 7A, tag people. So I'm going to tag Apocalypse Reading, Guilty Feet, Middle of the Book March, Remembered Reads, Duncan McCurdy, Kier the Scrivener, and Larry Has Opinions. So thanks for watching, and I hope that my answers were at least somewhat satisfactory and made a little bit of sense. If you'd like to comment, feel free. I always like to have a discussion with people in the comments, and otherwise I will see you next video. Bye.